What if I told you that a single moment of kindness, one that no one knew about, had the power to change the world? What if that moment came from a letter written by Pope Francis to one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Keanu Reeves? In the next few minutes, you're about to hear a story that will challenge everything you think you know about fame, faith, and the incredible strength of a simple act of compassion. This is more than just a story. It's a call to action. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear might just change the way you look at two of the most respected men on the planet. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Across the globe, millions of people had tuned in to watch a live charity interview featuring none other than Keanu Reeves, the beloved, almost mythically humble Hollywood superstar. The event had promised laughter, inspiration, and stories about generosity, and for the first hour, it delivered just that. Keanu was his usual self, shy smiles, modest chuckles, sharing anecdotes about supporting children's hospitals, building homes, and funding arts programs. The interviewer, a polished journalist known for a smooth, upbeat style, kept the conversation lively and warm. Jokes were exchanged. There were a few heartfelt moments. Donations flooded in. But then, just as the interview was about to wrap up, something unexpected happened. Keanu paused. It wasn't the kind of pause that happens when someone loses their train of thought or fumbles for the right words. No, this pause was different. He grew visibly still, almost solemn. His hands, which had been casually resting on his lap, slowly clasped together. His gaze, normally soft and inviting, sharpened with a sudden intensity. He leaned slightly forward and looked straight into the camera, as if trying to reach through the screen and speak directly to every single person watching. "There's something about Pope Francis that the world deserves to know," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Something that deeply changed my life." The studio audience fell silent. The interviewer blinked, startled, unsure whether to interject or simply let Keanu continue. Across the world, living rooms, bedrooms, cafes, all were suspended in a strange kind of collective breathholding. What could Keanu possibly mean? A scandal? A secret alliance? A miracle? Keanu glanced down briefly, gathering himself. When he looked up again, his eyes were glassy but determined. "Years ago, when I was at one of the lowest points of my life," he began, "someone very close to me suggested that I visit the Vatican, not for a tourist experience, but for something deeper. At the time, I was grieving. I was angry. I was lost. I had lost faith in almost everything, including myself." He took a slow breath, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. "I managed to arrange a private visit. I didn't expect anything. I didn't want anything. But what happened there?" He shook his head slightly, as if still struggling to comprehend it himself. "It wasn't just a meeting. It was an encounter that redefined who I am." He described how Pope Francis had greeted him, not as a celebrity, not as a stranger, but as a brother. There were no cameras, no advisors whispering protocols. It was just the two of them in a small, sunlit room. "He didn't offer me empty platitudes," Keanu said. "He didn't try to fix me. Instead, he listened, really listened, for hours. He spoke about suffering, about love, about the mystery of why we hurt, and why we still hope. He told me something I'll never forget." The audience leaned forward, almost in unison. Keanu smiled faintly, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Pope Francis said, the greatest acts of courage are not those that make headlines. They are the quiet choices to forgive, to keep loving, and to keep living, even when you have every reason to give up." He paused again, letting the words hang in the air. "That conversation didn't magically heal me. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something far more precious. It gave me permission to be human. It reminded me that dignity isn't about being perfect. It's about carrying our scars with honor." For a moment, the studio was utterly still, the silence more profound than any applause could have been. Keanu wiped his face, chuckling softly at his own emotions. "I didn't expect to share that tonight," he admitted, "but seeing all of you, being part of something that's about helping others, it reminded me of that day. Reminded me of the difference one person's kindness can make." The interviewer, her own eyes glistening, finally found her voice. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Keanu," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And thank you, Pope Francis, for reminding us all of the power of compassion." The broadcast ended not with fanfare, but with a moment of quiet reverence, and across the world, countless viewers sat in silence, moved not just by the story, but by the reminder that even the most celebrated among us carry invisible wounds, and that sometimes a single encounter with true humanity can change everything. Keanu Reeves sat back in his chair, his hands loosely folded, his voice steady but laced with emotion. He continued, "Several years ago, during one of the darkest periods of my life, after losing my best friend, my girlfriend, and facing the deep, isolating loneliness that fame often brings, something unexpected happened. I received a letter. The audience leaned in closer, hanging on to every word. At first, Keanu said, offering a faint, almost incredulous smile, I thought it was a joke. I mean, me getting a letter from the Vatican, from the Pope himself. He shook his head, as if still amazed by the memory. It felt surreal, but it was real, very real. The interviewer, wide-eyed, motioned for him to continue. Keanu explained that the letter had come from Pope Francis personally. Somehow, through the hidden channels that connect people across continents and worlds, the Pope had heard about Keanu's struggles, the tragic loss of his best friend River Phoenix, the devastating death of his girlfriend Jennifer Syme, and the constant pressure and isolation that came with being a global icon. He knew, Keanu said, his voice softening, that underneath the headlines and the movie posters and the red carpet photos, there was a man who was hurting, a man who was beginning to lose faith in people and the goodness of life. He paused, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. The letter was short, he continued. It wasn't filled with long speeches or religious doctrine. It was simple, human. It said, in a world full of noise, true peace is found not through fame or wealth, but through kindness and service to others. Keanu repeated the line slowly, his voice almost reverent, as if repeating a sacred mantra. Those words, he said, pierced through the fog of grief and disillusionment he had been trapped in. They didn't magically heal the wounds he carried, but they planted a seed, a small, stubborn seed of hope. I realized, Keanu said, that the real healing wasn't going to come from escaping my pain or trying to drown it out. It was going to come from reaching out to others, from being part of something bigger than myself. He smiled, a small, genuine smile, the kind that carries the weight of real experience behind it. He didn't see me as a celebrity, Keanu said, his voice thick with emotion. He saw me as a human being in pain. The audience sat in stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody had ever heard this story before, and hearing it from Keanu's own mouth made it even more powerful, even more intimate. It wasn't just a Hollywood star bearing his soul. It was a fellow human being inviting everyone into a deeply private, transformative moment. He described how, after reading the letter, he felt something shift inside him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to find new purpose in small acts of kindness. Quiet donations to children's hospitals, secret gifts to struggling co-workers, private funding for cancer research, not for publicity, not for applause, simply because, in his words, it's what keeps the light alive in a world that can sometimes feel very dark. The interviewer, her voice shaky, asked him how it felt to be noticed in such a profound way by someone as respected as Pope Francis. Keanu smiled thoughtfully. It felt humbling, he said. It reminded me that no matter how far apart we are, in geography, in status, in culture, compassion can still bridge the distance. A simple letter, a few honest words, they can save a life. They can save your life. He looked directly into the camera, speaking now not just to the people in the studio, but to everyone watching at home. If you're out there tonight, he said, and you're struggling, know that you're not invisible. You're not forgotten. Sometimes the people you least expect are rooting for you. Sometimes hope comes from places you never imagined. The audience erupted into applause, not the raucous, explosive kind typical of television shows, but the kind that builds slowly, heartfelt, sincere. A collective rising to honor the vulnerability they had just witnessed. As the evening drew to a close, Keanu leaned back in his chair, visibly lighter, as if sharing this hidden chapter of his life had lifted a weight from his shoulders. And somewhere, perhaps in a quiet room in Vatican City, an elderly man in white might have smiled, knowing that a single act of kindness, a single letter, had helped change the course of a life, and through it, perhaps countless others. But that wasn't all. Keanu, his voice steady but clearly emotional, went on to reveal that a few months after receiving the letter, he received another extraordinary invitation, one that would further change the course of his life. He had been invited to meet Pope Francis in person at the Vatican. The audience gasped softly. The idea of such a private, personal encounter between a Hollywood star and the head of the Catholic Church felt almost surreal. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped loosely, his tone reflective. I had always considered myself spiritual, he said, but not very religious. I believed in something bigger than us, but I wasn't sure what to call it. I wasn't sure where to find it. I didn't expect a meeting with a pope to be the place where I'd start to understand. He described arriving at the Vatican, the ancient stone walls, the golden light filtering through towering windows, the hush of centuries of history wrapped around him like a living presence. He had expected a formal, guarded meeting, protocols, speeches, maybe even a sense of distance. But what he found was something very different. When I met him, Keanu said, a soft wonder still in his voice, he didn't speak to me like a politician or a religious leader. He spoke like a friend, a real friend. Keanu paused, searching for the right words. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, every word felt like it came from a place of genuine love. Not judgment, not superiority, just love, as if he could see past everything. The fame, the headlines, the mistakes, and was speaking directly to the part of me that was still just human. The room was utterly still, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Keanu then shared a particular moment during their meeting that had stayed with him more deeply than anything else. They had been talking about life, about suffering, about the strange contradictions of fame, how it could make you visible to millions, yet feel invisible to yourself. Pope Francis leaned in, and with a kindness that was almost overwhelming, said something that would change Keanu's life forever. Fame is a tool. If you carry it with humility, you can change lives you may never even meet. Keanu repeated the word slowly, his voice thick with emotion. It was like a lightning bolt straight to my soul, he said. I realized I had been looking at it all wrong. Fame wasn't a curse to run from. It wasn't a prize to cling to. It was a responsibility, a gift that could be used, if handled the right way, to lift others up. He smiled softly, a glimmer of tears in his eyes. From that moment, he said, I decided to live differently. It wasn't about making grand gestures. It wasn't about big public displays of charity. It was about the little things, helping a stranger without being asked, funding causes quietly, treating every person, no matter who they were, with dignity and kindness. He began dedicating more time to charitable efforts, often anonymously. He made it a mission to treat every encounter, from a major film director to a fan asking for a selfie, with the same respect and attention. Fame, he realized, was not about being served. It was about serving others without expecting anything in return. I made a promise to myself, Keanu said, that no matter how successful I became, no matter how much the world praised or criticized me, I would stay grounded. I would stay grateful. I would use whatever platform I had to make things a little better for someone else. The audience sat in silence, many visibly moved, some wiping away tears. Keanu leaned back, his face calm, peaceful. I don't know why he chose to write to me, he said. I don't know why he gave me that time, but I do know this. Sometimes a simple act of kindness, a letter, a conversation, a few honest words, can change a life, and that life can then go on to change others. As the interview drew to a close, it was clear that this wasn't just another celebrity story. It was a reminder, raw, powerful, and profoundly human, that even in a noisy, chaotic world, compassion still had the power to cut through the noise and heal. And somewhere deep in the heart of the Vatican, an old letter, simple, handwritten, offered in quiet hope, had found its mark. After all these years, why did Keanu decide to share this deeply personal story live on air? It was a question that hung in the air, unspoken yet palpable. As the interview continued, Keanu leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees, his voice quieter now, but carrying a deep conviction. In today's world, he said, people are losing faith, not just in institutions or governments, but in themselves, in each other, even in hope. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I see so much anger, he continued, so much division, people shouting over each other instead of listening, people tearing each other down over the smallest differences. It's exhausting. It's heartbreaking. The room was utterly still. Everyone seemed to sense that Keanu wasn't just speaking as a celebrity. He was speaking as a man who had walked through darkness and still found a reason to believe. But even with all of that, he said, I also see something else. Tiny acts of kindness that nobody talks about. A stranger helping someone with their groceries. A nurse working a double shift to care for people she'll never meet again. A kid giving his lunch to a classmate who forgot his own. He smiled softly, the kind of smile that comes from seeing both the best and worst of humanity, and choosing to focus on the best. I believe, Keanu said, it's time to remind people that real change doesn't come from some grand revolution overnight. It starts with small acts of compassion, simple moments of grace. That's what Pope Francis taught me. He shifted slightly in his seat, gathering his thoughts before continuing. For a long time, Keanu admitted, I kept this story private. I didn't tell anyone outside my closest circle, not because I was ashamed, far from it, but because I didn't want anyone to think I was using the Pope's kindness for publicity. He laughed quietly, almost self-consciously. You know how it is. In today's world, everything gets twisted. A story like this could easily be turned into clickbait, into headlines, into something it was never meant to be. He grew serious again, his eyes earnest. This was never about me, Keanu said firmly. It was about the message, about the idea that no matter who you are, a movie star, a janitor, a teacher, a refugee, you are seen, you are heard, you are loved. He glanced around the room, making eye contact with the audience, the interviewer, the cameras. And today, he said, the world needs that message more than ever. The interviewer, her voice thick with emotion, asked Keanu what he hoped people would take away from his story. Keanu didn't hesitate. "I hope people realize that we don't have to wait for some great leader or some huge movement to fix things. Every one of us, every single one, can be that small light in someone else's darkness. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be rich. You just have to care." He leaned back, a look of peaceful determination on his face. "Hold a door open. Listen without judging. Forgive even when it's hard. Smile at a stranger. These things may seem small," he said, "but they ripple outward. They change the people around you, and when enough people do them, they change the world." The studio was silent again, but it wasn't the heavy, tense silence of earlier. It was lighter, full of something rare and precious. Hope. As the interview wound down, Keanu sat quietly, almost as if the weight of what he had shared was still settling in his own heart. He didn't seem interested in basking in applause or admiration. He had said what he came to say, nothing more, nothing less, and in doing so, he had offered the world a rare and precious gift, a reminder that even in a fractured, hurting world, compassion, real, quiet, everyday compassion, still had the power to heal, to unite, and to inspire. Sometimes, it only takes one voice to remind us. Sometimes, it only takes one story to bring light back into focus. And sometimes, it only takes one simple, powerful act, like a letter from a distant pope to a grieving actor, to set 1,000 other acts of kindness into motion. The world reacts, and what happens next? Within hours of the broadcast, Keanu Reeves' heartfelt revelation had spread across the globe like wildfire. Social media platforms lit up with the story. News outlets ran headlines in bold type, and people from every walk of life tuned in, rewatching the clip where one of the world's most beloved actors laid bare a secret that had lived quietly in his heart for years. But what was even more remarkable than the viral nature of the story was the reaction it sparked. Millions around the world began sharing their own experiences, stories of unexpected kindness, moments when a stranger's small gesture had saved them, lifted them, or given them the strength to go on. The comment sections on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook became flooded not with outrage or division, but with hope. A single spark had lit 1,000 candles. Celebrities, world leaders, athletes, teachers, frontline workers, all kinds of people posted their own tributes, their own reflections. Some admitted that they had been feeling hopeless, weighed down by the negativity that seemed to saturate daily life. Others said they had forgotten what it meant to believe in goodness until Keanu's story reminded them. Hashtags like #KindnessMovement and #BeTheLight began trending within hours. Challenges encouraging people to perform random acts of kindness flooded TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. In one viral video, a teenager paid for a struggling single mother's groceries. In another, a group of friends handed out handwritten notes of encouragement on busy city streets. People donated meals, forgave old grudges, volunteered their time, and started community projects, inspired by the simple, powerful message that compassion could still change the world. Charities around the world reported a sudden surge in donations and new volunteers. Food banks, homeless shelters, children's hospitals, all saw record numbers of people stepping up, asking, "How can I help?" It wasn't just a trend. For a moment, it felt like a movement, a wave of goodness powerful enough to remind humanity that even in its darkest moments, light could still break through. And then came an extraordinary confirmation. The Vatican itself issued a rare public statement, not only confirming the authenticity of Keanu's story, but also offering their own reflection on the moment. When light is shared, the statement read, "The darkness has no power. We are humbled that an act of compassion, offered quietly so many years ago, has now blossomed into a reminder of our shared humanity. May this spirit of kindness continue to grow." It was an unprecedented moment. The private, silent act of one man, Pope Francis, echoed across the world through the humble voice of another, Keanu Reeves, and became a spark for global compassion. Reporters later asked Keanu if he had anticipated such a response. He shook his head with a soft smile. "Not at all," he said. "I just felt like it was time. I didn't expect anything beyond maybe reaching 1 or 2 hearts. But seeing what's happened, it's beautiful. It's a reminder that people want to believe. They just need a reason." As the broadcast neared its final moments, after the applause and the tears and the heartfelt thanks, Keanu took a deep breath and looked straight into the camera, into the eyes of millions watching around the world, and offered one final line. A message distilled from everything he had learned, everything he had endured. "Be the person you needed when you were hurting. That's how we change the world." The words weren't shouted. They weren't dressed up in grand gestures or dramatic flair. They were spoken simply, plainly, with the quiet conviction of someone who knew firsthand what it meant to be broken and to be healed, even a little, by the compassion of another. And maybe that was why the words stuck, because they didn't come from a polished speechwriter or a carefully curated PR campaign. They came from one man's heart to the hearts of many. And so, across continents and oceans, languages and borders, something extraordinary happened. For a moment, just a fleeting, precious moment, humanity remembered itself. And it all started because one man decided to share a hidden truth, inspired by another man's silent act of kindness. A reminder that light, no matter how small, is always stronger than the dark. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Let's spread the kindness together.